June 6, 1944. The beaches of Normandy erupted in chaos as 156,000 Allied troops hurled themselves against Hitler's Atlantic Wall. Yet amid the smoke and slaughter lurked a secret that would determine whether they lived or died. Not a weapon, but a harbor floating on the open sea. Conceived by desperate minds, constructed in absolute secrecy, and towed across the turbulent English Channel in massive segments, this artificial port would be assembled in just 10 days under enemy fire. The Germans had destroyed every French harbor, confident no army could survive without one. They were wrong. This engineering marvel, codenamed Mulberry, would supply an invasion force of 2 million men, and Hitler never saw it coming. By early 1943, the Allies faced a logistical nightmare no amount of firepower could solve. They could storm the beaches of Nazi-occupied Europe, but without 10,000 tons of daily supplies, even the most successful landing would wither and die. Fuel, ammunition, tanks, medical supplies, all had to flow uninterrupted from ship to shore, yet every suitable port along the French coast stood either under German control or rigged for demolition. Allied intelligence confirmed Hitler's directive: destroy all harbor facilities if retreat became necessary. At the Trident Conference in Washington, Churchill, Roosevelt, and their military commanders confronted this brutal equation. No port meant no invasion. No invasion meant no victory. The solution they authorized was considered madness by conventional military doctrine: build artificial floating harbors larger than Gibraltar from scratch, tow them across the unpredictable channel, and install them under enemy fire off the coast of Normandy, a feat of engineering never before attempted in human history. The task fell to an unlikely alliance of British and American engineers, civilian minds normally dedicated to peacetime infrastructure like highway bridges and shipping docks. Under the relentless leadership of Major General John C.H. Lee and the visionary British engineer Sir Bruce White, desperate teams sketched seemingly impossible solutions on whatever surfaces they had available. The harbors, codenamed Mulberry A and Mulberry B, would not be singular constructions but modular systems comprising floating roadways called whales, connected to pierhead units named spuds. These would all be protected by massive sunken block ships and concrete caissons called phoenixes, carefully engineered to replicate the protective breakwater of a natural harbor. Every component required precise design specifications: the ability to disassemble rapidly, transport across hundreds of miles of treacherous open water, and reassemble in hostile conditions, all while ensuring the capacity to unload 2,500 vehicles and 12,000 tons of crucial supplies daily. When questioned about the ambitious scale, one British designer remarked with grim determination, "We are not merely building a port, we are constructing the eighth wonder of the world, only this one must move at our command." The timetable defied military precedent. They had just 10 days to transform theoretical blueprints into a functioning harbor capable of withstanding 45-minute rough channel gales, extreme tidal variations, and sustained enemy bombardment. Churchill personally diverted critical resources with a single command: let all give way to this. Across Britain, civilian concrete plants shut down as 212 Phoenix caissons began taking shape, some weighing 6,000 tons and standing 6 stories tall. American steel mills in Pittsburgh and Cleveland rolled out miles of specialized bridging that could flex with wave action, yet support 40-ton Sherman tanks. In the Clyde shipyards, workers toiled through blackout conditions, welding massive spud pierheads in 3 continuous shifts. What they lacked in time, they compensated for with scale: 45,000 workers, 168 tugs, 4-on-1 towing vessels, and nearly 2 million cubic yards of concrete mobilized for a single purpose. When Admiral Bertram Ramsay reviewed the first complete construction schedule, He simply annotated it with 4 words that echoed through the chain of command. Failure is not discussable. On June 7th, just 1 day after D-Day, the first components of Mulberry arrived off Normandy's bloodied coastline. Concrete caissons weighing 6,000 tons each were deliberately scuttled in precise formations, creating artificial breakwaters where nature provided none. Through 8-foot swells, engineers on salvaged tugs battled both the elements and intermittent German artillery, their voices hoarse from shouting coordinates over howling winds. Every steel roadway segment required perfect alignment. A miscalculation of inches could mean catastrophic failure under the weight of Sherman tanks and supply trucks. The ingenious spud pierheads, rising and falling with the channel's 13-foot tidal variations, enabled continuous offloading regardless of water level, a feat conventional ports required massive permanent infrastructure to achieve. American Seabees worked alongside Royal Engineers in 20-hour shifts, many surviving on caffeine and adrenaline while securing crucial connections in frigid water. By June 17th, both harbors stood operational. Mulberry A at Omaha Beach under American control, Mulberry B at Gold Beach under British command, together processing 6,000 tons of supplies daily, defying German intelligence, who had declared such a feat a military impossibility. Then came the storm. On June 19th, the worst channel gale in 4 decades crashed into the Normandy coast, with winds exceeding 60 miles per hour and waves towering beyond 20 feet. For 3 relentless days, Mulberry A, the American harbor, suffered catastrophic destruction. Its massive Phoenix caissons shifted under the merciless assault, fracturing and dragging the intricate network of whales and spud pierheads into the churning sea. Supply operations halted completely as wreckage littered the shoreline, commanders watching as months of planning and engineering genius disintegrated before their eyes. Yet Mulberry B survived. The British construction benefited from a marginally more protected position and critical reinforcement, with additional block ships implemented mere days before the storm struck. The contrast in outcomes proved decisive for the campaign. While American forces abandoned their shattered harbor and reverted to improvised beach landings and hastily captured ports, British engineers maintained Mulberry B, transforming it into the vital artery for the entire European front. They adapted with remarkable ingenuity, securing reinforcements to compromised roadways and conducting underwater welding operations through nightfall. By mid-July, nearly 500,000 tons of critical war material had moved through the remaining harbor, providing irrefutable evidence that human ingenuity, even when confronted with nature's full fury, could extract triumph from apparent catastrophe. The legacy of the Mulberry harbors transcends their immediate wartime utility, fundamentally reshaping our understanding of modern conflict. War could no longer be decided solely by generals and gunfire, but now required welders, draftsmen, logisticians, and civil planners who had never fired a shot in combat. The front line had permanently extended backward to distant factories and drawing boards, where innovative concepts became as decisive as artillery barrages. Mulberry represented the first true fusion of civilian engineering and military necessity at such massive scale, proving that victory required more than overwhelming firepower. It demanded unprecedented imagination coupled with resolute execution. Though one harbor surrendered to nature's fury, the engineering principles endured, influencing everything from modern oil platforms to disaster response infrastructure. The most profound impact came in military planning itself, where logistics finally claimed equal footing with tactics in strategic considerations. The surviving Mulberry B processed over 2.5 million men, 500,000 vehicles, and 4 million tons of supplies before the capture of Cherbourg and Antwerp rendered it obsolete, statistics that validated Churchill's controversial diversion of wartime resources. In the decades following, when military planners gathered to discuss amphibious operations from Korea to the Falklands, the ghosts of those makeshift harbors haunted every calculation. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. Yet for all their triumphs, the Mulberry harbors were forged in failure as much as success. The development process was littered with abandoned concepts, some bordering on the realm of science fiction. Engineers initially proposed a continuous floating causeway stretching from England to France, a fantasy quickly dismissed after preliminary calculations. Another team suggested anchoring concrete-filled balloons as mobile breakwaters, a concept that violated fundamental principles of physics and naval engineering. Even approved designs faced constant setbacks. Early spud pierheads collapsed during mild Solent sea trials, requiring urgent structural reinforcements. Prototype whale roadways twisted catastrophically when wave harmonics exceeded design tolerances, necessitating strengthened gusset plates and redesigned pivot joints. Secrecy complicated everything, with engineering teams working in isolation, unaware of how their components would integrate into the larger system. Welders fabricated critical sections with no knowledge of their ultimate purpose, working from partial blueprints, deliberately missing crucial context. Yet these struggles weren't failures, but evolutionary steps toward an effective solution. The Mulberry harbors emerged from this crucible of trial and error, not as perfect constructions, but as testaments to relentless adaptation. In the unforgiving arithmetic of war, where victory hinges on sufficiency rather than perfection, the harbors proved decisively adequate. Sometimes being enough is more powerful than being flawless. Behind the overwhelming statistics and steel workloads stood the unheralded architects whose ingenuity transformed Mulberry from impossible dream to operational reality. Hugh Ioris Hughes, a Welsh civil engineer who never fired a shot in combat, revolutionized harbor protection with his Bombardier floating breakwater, ingeniously dissipating destructive wave energy through calculated resonance rather than conventional mass. Colonel Eugene Raybould of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers fought his war on drawing boards, insisting on modular redundancy principles that proved prophetic when the Channel storms struck with unprecedented fury. These individuals, routinely dismissed by traditional military hierarchies as overly academic or impractical, became the silent orchestrators of strategic victory. Their weapons were logarithmic tables and stress calculations, their battles waged in hastily assembled drafting rooms under crushing deadlines where failure meant thousands of Allied deaths. They worked in compartmentalized secrecy, many never seeing the final integration of their components until after the war concluded. When exhausted infantry streamed across the floating roadways with vital ammunition and medical supplies, few comprehended the engineering marvel beneath their boots. Yet in that disconnect lay their greatest triumph. They had made the impossible seem so routine that soldiers simply expected the harbor to function, a testament to engineering so seamless it became invisible precisely when most critical. As the war faded and Europe staggered toward recovery, the remnants of the Mulberry harbors gradually vanished beneath sand and tide, their rusted skeletons consumed by time, while their legacy endured. Modern military academies worldwide study these structures not merely as engineering case studies, but as watershed moments that redefined warfare itself. They stand as powerful vindications of unconventional thinking during humanity's darkest hour. The concrete remnants still visible along Normandy's coastline during extreme low tides serve as silent monuments to human ingenuity, drawing engineers and historians who trace their fingers along corroded steel that once supported the liberation of a continent. Beyond their physical presence, the harbors fundamentally altered military doctrine, establishing logistics as the cornerstone of modern combat operations. When Pentagon planners later designed the massive J-LOTS, joint logistics over the shore, systems for conflicts from Vietnam to Desert Storm, they drew directly from Mulberry's principles, adapting its innovations for contemporary battlefields. Yet perhaps their most profound lesson transcends engineering specifications and military applications. When trapped between the urgent need to act and the absence of traditional options, the Allies chose to invent a new path entirely. It came with risks, setbacks, and costs paid in blood and resources, but it irrevocably altered the course of history. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas, and this one changed everything. Yet the story of Mulberry transcends mere engineering, revealing what happens when human imagination confronts impossible constraints with relentless courage. In this global conflict, where battlefields stretched across continents and oceans, it was strategic foresight that truly bridged these impossible distances. The harbors emerged not from abundance, but from desperation, translated into vision and methodical execution. Their most profound legacy wasn't their immediate tactical advantage, but how they fundamentally redefined the relationship between military power and engineering innovation. From forward operating bases to field hospitals to portable airstrips developed in subsequent decades, Mulberry's modular principles revolutionized military infrastructure worldwide. Naval architects still study these harbors not as historical curiosities, but as foundational case studies in adaptive design under extreme constraints. The concrete remnants still visible at extreme low tide along the Normandy coast stand as monuments to what happens when conventional thinking fails and innovation becomes the only path forward. In those temporary structures, assembled under fire and eventually reclaimed by the sea, we find warfare's essential truth. Humanity's greatest weapon has always been our capacity to reimagine the impossible. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. The spectacular success and resilience of the Mulberry harbors emerged not merely from concrete and steel, but from an unprecedented convergence of intellectual courage and institutional will. This represented bureaucracy yielding to genius, logistics empowering imagination, a singular moment where national rivalries dissolved into shared purpose. Civil servants and military officers who routinely clashed over peacetime priorities worked shoulder to shoulder in smoke-filled planning rooms, risking careers and lives on an unproven concept. Political leaders gambled not just resources, but their credibility on the radical notion that engineers, not generals, might hold the key to breaching Fortress Europe. The true triumph of Mulberry wasn't merely logistical or tactical, but philosophical, proving that in humanity's darkest hours, victory belongs not always to those with overwhelming force, but to those willing to reimagine what force could become. Each concrete caisson and floating roadway represented not just material innovation, but conceptual revolution, challenging fundamental assumptions about warfare itself. Through their audacious execution, these harbors demonstrated that adaptive ingenuity could overcome even the most formidable defensive strategies. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. What the Mulberry harbors ultimately embodied was more than a singular engineering achievement. They were a declaration that the arc of war could bend under the weight of collective brilliance. In a world shattered by conflict and chaos, these floating fortresses demonstrated a radical truth, that obstacles measured in miles or months could be conquered with ideas measured in millimeters and minutes. They proved that even amid total war, the human mind remained the most powerful weapon in any arsenal, capable of manufacturing hope from steel and concrete against impossible odds. The Mulberry harbors fundamentally reshaped military logistics doctrine across all subsequent conflicts, from Korea to Afghanistan, establishing that victory depends not solely on who strikes hardest, but on who imagines most boldly and executes most precisely. Their concrete remnants, slowly dissolving into the Channel seabed, continue teaching engineers and strategists the same lesson Churchill understood when he diverted critical resources to this audacious gamble. Innovation properly applied can render even the most formidable defenses obsolete. As the echoes of artillery faded and nations turned toward rebuilding a broken world, the legacy of these artificial harbors endured not as relics, but as blueprints for confronting seemingly insurmountable challenges. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. Yet buried within their story lies the sobering reminder that even our greatest triumphs remain bound by the constraints of their time. The Mulberry harbors represented victory carved from desperate necessity, conceived as temporary lifelines rather than permanent infrastructure. Their true brilliance lay not in longevity, but in their urgent functionality, answering a challenge so immediate that compromise became strategic virtue. They illuminate a harsh reality of warfare, that success often demands embracing incomplete solutions and calculated risks when perfect answers remain beyond reach. In military academies and strategic planning rooms today, commanders study Mulberry not for flawless execution, but for its audacious conception. Valued not because it endured forever, but because it lasted precisely long enough to alter the campaign's trajectory. As modern warfare embraces increasingly sophisticated technologies across ever more complex battle spaces, the fundamental principles that defined this engineering feat remain startlingly relevant: rapid adaptation, methodical problem-solving, and the institutional courage to commit fully to unconventional solutions when conventional wisdom predicts only failure. The Mulberry harbors stand as concrete proof that innovation properly applied can render even the most formidable defenses obsolete. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. The final accounting of Mulberry's success invites both awe and humility. It showcases the staggering heights human collaboration can reach when necessity forces unity across borders, disciplines, and egos. It also poses a silent challenge to future generations when the stakes are life, liberty, and the survival of civilization itself. Are we willing to discard comfort and convention to innovate with the same relentless urgency? From within bureaucratic labyrinths and chaotic workshops, the engineers of Mulberry sculpted a future that would inspire the architecture of global logistics, rapid response missions, and disaster relief efforts for decades to come. Their legacy speaks from beneath the waves and concrete fragments of the Normandy coast. Extraordinary problems require extraordinary minds willing to risk failure for the chance at salvation. The Mulberry harbors proved that where traditional military might falters, engineering innovation advances. In the face of impossible circumstances, they demonstrated the adaptive resilience that would become central to modern warfare doctrine. Where generals saw impassable barriers, engineers saw puzzles awaiting solutions. Their triumph wasn't merely in delivering supplies, but in redefining what military planners considered possible, establishing a precedent for technical creativity that would influence operations from the Berlin airlift to modern expeditionary logistics platforms. In moments where nations faltered, it was vision that carried the day. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. Ultimately, the saga of the Mulberry harbors represents human defiance against impossibility, not merely an engineering marvel, but a philosophical breakthrough in warfare. They emerged from collaborative genius under unforgiving deadlines, where conventional military doctrine yielded to radical innovation. What distinguishes these structures in military history is how they transformed fundamental weakness into strategic advantage, creating possibility where none existed. Their success validated Churchill's controversial gamble of diverting critical wartime resources toward an unproven concept, proving that logistical innovation could render even Hitler's most formidable defensive calculations obsolete. The harbors established that modern warfare demands not only firepower, but imagination, not merely courage in combat, but courage in conception. Their physical remnants along the Normandy coast are gradually disappearing, but their conceptual architecture permanently altered military planning across generations. From Vietnam to Afghanistan, expeditionary forces have deployed systems directly descended from Mulberry's principles, applying its lessons in adaptability and modular design. These floating wonders demonstrated that when conventional paths to victory are blocked, the audacity to forge entirely new paths becomes the ultimate strategic weapon. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. Next time you see concrete remnants along Normandy's coastline or observe modular systems deployed in modern humanitarian operations, remember they descend from that pivotal moment when Allied leadership gambled everything on engineering innovation under enemy fire. The Mulberry harbors represented more than a solution to logistical impossibility. They embodied the revolutionary concept that military victory could be constructed from reinforced concrete and audacious vision. During humanity's darkest conflict, when civilization teetered on collapse, these floating wonders emerged not as monuments to destruction, but as testaments to human ingenuity. From bloodied beaches to smoke-filled war rooms where conventional thinking surrendered to desperate creativity, it was ultimately the engineer's calculations, not just the soldier's sacrifice, that altered the war's trajectory. The most profound revelation of Mulberry wasn't its immediate tactical advantage, but its demonstration that seemingly insurmountable obstacles yield to methodical innovation and collaborative genius. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. As the final waves of soldiers crossed floating roadways onto French soil, the Mulberry harbors completed their historic mission before slipping into relative obscurity. These temporary ports were never engineered for posterity, merely to exist long enough to irreversibly alter the war's trajectory. Their brief operational life, nevertheless, permanently transformed military strategic thinking, inaugurating an era where victory could depend not on destructive capability, but on constructive ingenuity. Today, when humanitarian supplies traverse oceans in hours, or emergency field hospitals materialize in disaster zones, the intellectual DNA of Mulberry flows through their designs. This is the enduring legacy of those engineers who confronted impossible deadlines with slide rules and determination, who mastered channel tides and German artillery with precision welds and mathematical calculations, and who proved to military planners worldwide that no logistical barrier stands impenetrable when conventional thinking yields to radical innovation. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. In the twilight of their relevance, the Mulberry harbors remind us that even the most extraordinary solutions are often temporary by design, crafted not for eternity, but for a critical moment in time. They capture a fleeting confluence of desperation, collaboration, and brilliance that allowed civilization to bend history back toward freedom. Military academies worldwide study these structures as living philosophy, proof that under extreme constraint, bold action guided by innovation becomes not only viable, but essential. These floating structures, assembled in secrecy and battered by war, embody the central paradox of modern conflict, The most enduring victories often come from the most ephemeral means. Their influence persists not in rusted bolts or crumbled concrete, but in every tactical decision to meet seemingly impossible challenges with methodical planning rather than surrender. When we examine modern amphibious operations from Korea to Kuwait, we see Mulberry's intellectual architecture supporting every logistical calculation. The harbors prove that solutions need not last forever. They need only last precisely long enough to alter destiny. In their deliberate impermanence lies their greatest lesson, that strategic victory often demands accepting calculated imperfection rather than pursuing unattainable perfection. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. As the tides gradually reclaim what remains of this audacious endeavor, the lessons of Mulberry persist not simply in military textbooks or along the eroding French coastline, but in every act of engineering courage born from urgent necessity. They remind us that innovation remains fragile, often carried forward by the overlooked and doubted, emerging from crises no established doctrine could address. In our century, confronting pandemics, climate catastrophes, and geopolitical instability, the spirit of Mulberry challenges engineers and planners to ask not what seems achievable, but what is absolutely necessary, then build it regardless of conventional limitations. During those 10 decisive days in June 1944, human intellect and determination conjured a harbor from open sea, defied both nature and warfare simultaneously, and demonstrated that impossibility transforms into inevitability when visionary ideas receive unwavering commitment. The floating harbors permanently altered military doctrine not through perfection, but through sufficiency, proving that solutions need not be flawless to be transformative. Their legacy endures in every rapid deployment system and emergency infrastructure solution developed since. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. In the final analysis, Mulberry stands as a monument to the power of daring ideas executed under pressure, a floating solution to a terrestrial problem that defied centuries of traditional military thinking. The harbor's triumph lay not in theoretical perfection, but in practical persistence, delivering functional brilliance at the very edge of feasibility. Hastily assembled from modular components, these harbors represented the unlikely marriage of visionary engineering and desperate necessity, transforming steel and concrete into the sinews of liberation. While German strategists dismissed the possibility of sustained logistical operations without capturing established ports, Allied engineers simply created new ones, rendering Hitler's entire defensive calculation obsolete in a matter of days. The harbors embodied a paradoxical truth about warfare itself, that solutions need not be eternal to be decisive. They need only exist long enough to irrevocably alter the strategic equation. Though the channel's relentless tides have reclaimed most physical evidence of this engineering marvel, its impact on military doctrine and strategic thinking remains indelible. Decades later, as we confront global crises demanding bold invention and unified resolve, the lesson still echoes from the surf of Normandy. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. So as we stand before today's challenges, the ultimate lesson of Mulberry transcends historical curiosity, serving as a living challenge to embrace ingenuity over inertia, collaboration over division, and calculated risk over resignation. In every modern crisis, from humanitarian disasters to climate catastrophes, the spirit of those makeshift harbors calls us forward. Solve the seemingly impossible through creativity, execute with relentless urgency, and never underestimate the transformative power of audacious ideas backed by collective determination. The Mulberry harbors represent more than an engineering footnote. They embody the moment when humanity discovered not merely how to land an army, but how to forge previously unimaginable paths forward when conventional options vanish. Their legacy lives not in the rusting remnants along French shores, but in our continued capacity to reimagine solutions when facing existential threat. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. And so, as future generations inherit a world shaped by both innovation and upheaval, the Mulberry harbors offer more than a tale of World War II engineering. They represent a summons. They call us to refuse passive inevitability when facing overwhelming obstacles, to remember that amid destruction, creation remains possible through vision, unity, and audacity. Whether confronting the uncertainty of pandemics, the urgency of climate adaptation, or the complexities of global conflict, the blueprint remains consistent. Imagine boldly, act urgently, commit completely. In those rushed welding sparks, bleary-eyed calculations, and improvised solutions, the engineers of Mulberry illuminated a path forward not merely for military logistics, but for human resilience itself. Their legacy persists in every instance where ingenuity confronts impossibility, where conventional wisdom bows to innovative necessity. The harbors prove that our greatest resource in crisis is not material abundance, but intellectual courage, the willingness to reimagine fundamental assumptions when survival demands nothing less. Their physical remnants may gradually surrender to time and tide, but their methodological blueprint endures in every crisis solution engineered since. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. So let the fading outlines of Mulberry's structures serve as lasting warnings and inspirations alike. Their crumbling forms whisper the enduring truth that architecture born in crisis often vanishes quietly, while its influence reshapes the very fabric of the future. In our time, when the world once again confronts existential challenges, the imperative rings clear. Do not wait for ideal conditions. Do not demand certainty. Act with deliberate innovation when conventional wisdom predicts failure. The story of Mulberry is not simply history, it is a blueprint for the future. From battlefield engineers to emergency responders, from climate strategists to urban planners, the guiding principle remains unchanged. When the path forward disappears, build one. Born from desperation, yet executed with methodical brilliance, these floating harbors demonstrated that when fear and hesitation yield to calculated courage, the impossible becomes achievable. Their physical remnants may continue dissolving into the channel, but their conceptual foundation supports every rapid deployment system and emergency infrastructure solution developed since. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. As we close the chapter on this extraordinary tale, let us not remember the Mulberry harbors simply as floating docks or wartime trivia, but as expressions of humanity's highest capability under its greatest stress. They teetered on the edge of feasibility, born not from luxury but urgency. Yet they stood long enough to pivot the tide of a world war. Their creation proves that even in moments of chaos, clarity can emerge through courageous innovation and uncompromising resolve. In every crisis where timelines accelerate and failure endangers millions, the spirit of Mulberry reminds us that ingenuity is not a luxury of peace, but the lifeblood of survival. Whether hidden beneath waves or immortalized in design blueprints, their legacy endures wherever problem solvers defy the odds, inventing pathways where none existed. This is not merely a story of World War II. It is a call to action whispered through generations that when faced with the abyss, think radically, build urgently, trust imagination. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. Let the rusted remnants of Mulberry dissolve into the channel waters, but let their profound lesson crystallize in our collective memory. In that desperate race to construct floating harbors under enemy fire and North Atlantic gales, humanity confronted its capacity to overcome seemingly insurmountable constraints through methodical innovation. We define ourselves not through comfortable victories, but through our responses to impossible challenges. The Mulberry harbors delivered more than military supplies. They fundamentally reframed what we consider possible during crisis, establishing that when conventional options vanish, human ingenuity creates alternatives. Their legacy persists wherever engineers confront humanitarian disasters, infrastructure failures, or logistical impossibilities with the same calculated audacity. These harbors remind us that heroism manifests not only in combat, but in drafting rooms, in hastily sketched calculations, in the minds of those who recognize that even seemingly impossible barriers have structural weaknesses waiting to be exploited. The Mulberry harbors proved that when civilization teeters on collapse, our greatest resource isn't firepower, but intellectual courage, the capacity to reimagine fundamental assumptions when survival permits nothing less. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. We leave the story of Mulberry not in solemn reverence, but with an urgent invitation. As new generations confront crises unforeseen by those harbor architects, their lesson remains crystal clear. Innovation transforms impossible circumstances into solvable problems. The engineers of 1944 weren't exceptional visionaries, but methodical problem solvers who confronted potential annihilation with calculations, welds, and unwavering determination. This blueprint remains our inheritance across every domain. From climate disasters flooding coastal communities to humanitarian supply chains fractured by conflict, from refugee crises to pandemic responses, where millions of lives hang on logistical innovation, Mulberry's intellectual architecture offers guidance. It challenges us to act not with violence, but with vision, to construct solutions precisely when conventional wisdom insists none exist. Though tides continue erasing their concrete remnants from Normandy's shores, the harbor's legacy persists wherever bold minds refuse capitulation to circumstance. In our era of accelerating challenges and dwindling time frames, remember that we define ourselves not by what threats we face, but by what solutions we build despite them. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. As Mulberry fades into history, eclipsed by decades of technological advancement, its moral and methodological compass continues to direct us toward the essence of human resilience. Those modular caissons and floating roadways contain a universal truth transcending their wartime origins. Unprecedented challenges can be met not with retreat, but with rigorous creativity and the courage to act. The Mulberry harbors were declarations of intent from a civilization refusing to accept the permanence of limitation. They delivered not just supplies to battlefield shores, but inspiration to every engineer, planner, and leader confronting crisis-driven innovation since. In our era, where emergencies arrive without warning and solutions must be imagined in real time, Mulberry urges us to honor its legacy through action, applying its ethos of disciplined, collaborative problem-solving to the seemingly intractable problems of our own time. From climate adaptation to pandemic response to humanitarian crises, the intellectual architecture of these harbors offers a blueprint for transforming impossibility into opportunity through methodical innovation and unwavering commitment. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. In a century already confronted with cascading global emergencies, the blueprint forged in 10 desperate days off Normandy's coastline remains our most vital inheritance. Mulberry was never merely about defeating Nazis. It represented the moment humanity discovered how to transform logistical impossibility into strategic advantage through methodical innovation. These floating harbors proved that breakthrough solutions rarely emerge from comfortable consensus, but from radical departures championed by those willing to stake careers, reputations, and lives on unproven concepts when existing doctrine offers no viable path forward. As engineers, strategists, and policymakers confront today's accelerating crises, from climate disasters to pandemic responses to refugee emergencies, Mulberry stands not as historical curiosity, but as operational mandate, a concrete demonstration that the razor-thin margin between civilization's collapse and resilience often hinges on our capacity to discard conventional limitations and create entirely new possibilities. The harbor's true genius wasn't technological perfection, but its fundamental reconception of what could be accomplished under impossible constraints. Let the storm-battered prototypes, the exhausted calculations, and the resolute engineers of 1944 remind us that even when confronting seemingly insurmountable obstacles, human ingenuity remains our most powerful resource. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. So let this be the enduring truth etched not in concrete slabs, but in the collective memory of humanity striving to outpace its own limitations. The Mulberry harbors didn't just support a beachhead, they redefined the very notion of what becomes possible when engineers choose innovation over inertia, coalition over division, and calculated ambition over resignation. In every modern crisis demanding rapid response, from disaster relief operations to humanitarian supply chains to pandemic infrastructure, their blueprint echoes across generations, the silent command to build, to innovate, to defy apparent impossibility through methodical creativity and unwavering resolve. As the final rivets rust and North Atlantic tides reclaim the physical remnants of this engineering marvel, we face a challenge more urgent than ever. To carry their lesson forward not as historical curiosity, but as operational imperative. The Mulberry harbors prove conclusively that when conventional options vanish, the capacity to imagine entirely new possibilities becomes our most powerful strategic resource. History doesn't merely reward the prepared, it elevates those prepared to invent when doctrine fails. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. And thus, the tale of Mulberry brings us full circle, not merely to the moment of its conception, but to the enduring truth it taught the world. That victory, in war or peace, belongs to those who dare to create alternatives when no options remain. It is easy to marvel at the engineering detail, the logistical ballet, the scale of execution. But at its core, Mulberry is not a monument to machines or materials. It is a monument to belief. Belief that no challenge is insurmountable when a society chooses innovation over despair, resolve over retreat. What transformed concrete and steel into liberation was not merely technical precision, but intellectual courage, the willingness to imagine solutions where conventional wisdom saw only obstacles. In classrooms, war rooms, and design labs around the globe, its lessons resonate still. That when the world stands caught between collapse and courage, there lies a narrow battleground where human ingenuity must prevail. The harbors themselves have largely vanished beneath the channel waters, but their methodology endures in every crisis response system, every emergency infrastructure solution, every instance where rapid adaptation determines survival. As we confront our own age of uncertainty, with challenges that demand not incremental adjustment but revolutionary reimagining, may we remember the clarity born from those storm-swept harbors, and in doing so, may we answer their legacy not in reverent silence, but in deliberate action. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. In the final reckoning, Mulberry proves a universal law of human progress, that in moments of greatest peril, greatness emerges not from preservation, but from bold departure. Its rusted caissons and vanished roadways stand not only as artifacts of a past war, but as instructions for the future. Whenever the modern world appears gridlocked by inertia or paralyzed by risk, when traditional pathways evaporate beneath crisis, Mulberry's lesson is simple and eternal. Build anyway. Build when the storm is incoming. Build when the blueprint is unfinished. Build when the experts warn it cannot be done. For in that act lies the essence of resilience. The floating harbors of 1944 didn't just carry men and materiel across a contested sea. They carried a philosophy forward through time, one defined not by what we inherited, but by what we dared construct. From hurricane-ravaged coastlines to pandemic response facilities, from refugee settlements to climate adaptation infrastructure, modern crisis management draws directly from Mulberry's intellectual architecture. These harbors demonstrated that when civilization teeters on collapse, our most valuable resource isn't material abundance, but methodical creativity applied with unwavering resolve. And in that courage to build the impossible, we find the will to survive and redefine every battle ahead. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. This, then, is the enduring lighthouse in Mulberry's wake, an engineering feat that began as desperate gamble but evolved into doctrinal gospel for crisis innovation worldwide. From rapid deployment bridges in flood zones to modular field hospitals in disaster areas, from emergency evacuation platforms to humanitarian supply chains, the intellectual architecture of those floating harbors endures. They stand as concrete proof that even when waves tower and deadlines compress, the human mind, liberated from conventional constraints and fueled by urgent necessity, can fabricate possibility where none existed. What distinguished Mulberry wasn't merely its technical specifications, but its philosophical transformation of military logistics, proving that adaptability could overcome even the most formidable defensive calculations. The harbors revealed that victory often hinges not on overwhelming force, but on imaginative problem-solving applied with methodical precision. Their legacy persists not through permanent infrastructure, but through their demonstration that solutions need only last precisely long enough to irreversibly alter strategic reality. In their deliberate impermanence and decisive impact, the Mulberry harbors revealed the essential blueprint of hope under pressure, changing how wars are fought, how crises are managed, and how civilization advances when facing existential threat. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. As the waves close over the last visible fragments of Mulberry, we are left not with ruins, but with revelation. These harbors, summoned from desperation and carried forward by methodical discipline, were never intended to endure eternally, only to last long enough to shift the arc of history. Their message echoes not just through the tides of Normandy, but through every challenge that demands urgent invention under impossible constraints. In these floating wonders we find a timeless call to action, Act boldly when certainty fails. Build what conventional wisdom deems impossible when delay threatens catastrophe. And trust that human ingenuity, properly focused and relentlessly applied, remains our most potent force for survival and progress. In that crucible of war, where chaos reigned and outcomes teetered on collapse, a handful of engineers dared to reshape reality with nothing but calculations, courage, and steel. Their triumph reminds us that real power lies not in permanence, but in the critical moment when vision overtakes fear, when we choose to build anyway, despite overwhelming odds. From humanitarian relief operations to climate adaptation infrastructure, their legacy lives wherever crisis demands innovation. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. And so, as we step away from the turbulent waters of Normandy and into the future's uncertain tide, the story of Mulberry becomes more than a historical account. It becomes a quiet imperative etched into the bedrock of crisis response and innovation. These ports, fragile and fleeting, remind us that history's most pivotal transformations often hinge not on grand monuments or sweeping declarations, but on temporary constructs born of resolve in moments when failure seemed inevitable. Their blueprints were drawn not in peacetime luxury, but in midnight urgency, sketched under blackout curtains and bomb sirens. They worked long enough to carry hope across impossible seas. This is Mulberry's true legacy, a message to every generation that building the future often requires assembling it on the fly, under duress, with only conviction and ingenuity as scaffolding. When threats loom largest and conventional wisdom offers no solutions, it is not brute strength, but boldness of thought that turns the tide. From humanitarian crisis response to climate adaptation engineering, their methodological DNA lives wherever impossible challenges demand immediate innovation. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. Let this final thought serve not as an ending, but as a continuation of the principle that made Mulberry possible. Greatness in crisis is not born from certainty, but from those who act despite doubt. The harbors built from modular steel and tidal defiance have long vanished beneath the waters, but their spirit points forward. When no manual exists, when time is short and the stakes are immense, there remains one constant truth: resilience is engineered, not inherited. In every challenge we face today, from collapsing critical infrastructure to unforeseen humanitarian emergencies, the lesson remains relevant. We succeed not by waiting for stability, but by engineering it amid the storm. That is the highest tribute to those wartime builders and thinkers who, for 10 impossible days, believed not just in boats and bolts, but in the raw power of ideas shaped under pressure. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything. Let this be where the mission concludes, not with the roar of engines or salute of flags, but with the quiet certainty that what was once hastily welded in obscurity now glows as a beacon of human potential. The Mulberry harbors were never meant to survive beyond their moment, yet their influence stretches across decades, disciplines, and continents, reinforcing the notion that when crisis demands action, brilliance lies in our ability to reimagine constraints as starting points for innovation. Their story reminds us that we honor those who came before, not merely in remembrance, but by emulating their courage to build swiftly, think boldly, and act decisively in the face of uncertainty. Even as their last concrete foundations dissolve into the channel waters, the echo of their achievement remains audible wherever urgent innovation intersects with human need. In field hospitals rapidly deployed to disaster zones, in emergency bridges spanning flood-ravaged communities, in humanitarian logistics platforms enabling survival amid chaos, their legacy lives on. War isn't just fought with bullets, it's fought with ideas. And this one changed everything.